listening to Enlivening Musings, a podcast to enhance your life so you live fully alive. Sponsored by the Pleasure Fairy app. Download it for more support. Welcome to Enlivening Musings. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're going to talk about the gift of vulnerability because as we had our last episode, the power of acknowledgement. So if you haven't checked that one out yet, go check it out. We got really into where that goes and the concept of being vulnerable and how uncomfortable that can feel for people, being vulnerable in all kinds of roles and holding space and what it's like as a practitioner. Mm-hmm. So we are going to get right into the great gift of being vulnerable, which, I mean, not to make you vulnerable, Katie, but I threw a but in there, so it might not mean the first part of it, huh? But I know you have a whole journey.
I know I was saying you've seen my journey on it. It's been crazy, wild, and I think back to like one of our first Zoom meetings, like back in 2020. Mm-hmm. When I felt like, I just think about that time, and that was even just that particular day was super hard. Like, I just remember everything that went into it. It was just like a weird whole experience. I ended up like going out to my parents' house and their farm. They were out of town and like wandering around outside, and like I went inside and like took a nap on their bed. Like all this like kind of weird stuff that I would never normally do. Like I never even normally take naps.
Yeah, same.
Let alone go home and do that. And like even when I showed up to the group that day, like everyone was like noticing like this childlike look to me.
Yeah, you look like your inner child, for sure.
And it was one of the first times that I was so raw and vulnerable and felt like I was kind of so broken that I just had no other choice but to show up that way. And for so much of my life and in my profession, I had shown up in the way of just like, I don't know if it was like being in control, being an authority. I've got it all together and I got to show up a certain way. Otherwise, people are going to judge me and not respect me and all the different things going on in my head. And I remember afterwards, one of the people on the call reached out to me and just sent me like the nicest message about how much she appreciated it and like kind of like loved and adored me because of it. And it was so crazy because I felt kind of a lot of shame and embarrassment showing up that way. And it was just wild. And then to like feel it continually like in groups for me to just be uncomfortable being vulnerable. And then as we've gone through it and I've learned more about myself and then into the gene keys and how being myself and natural is like the key to my radiance, and then have other people in our groups reflect that back to me, that in those moments where I felt most vulnerable, but I did it anyway, they were like, yeah, like I just knew I needed to know you and you were so radiant, and just other people in my life that have seen the change in me and they're like, wow, like you show up with like such a radiance and like aura now compared to when I first met you, whether it's someone that met me like a year ago, 6 months, or like Krista when we first met like 3-4 years ago. So vulnerability is powerful. It's changed my life.
It is. So I love all of that. I mean, so much. And I don't know, I just see it in like all of the different ways, because when you're vulnerable like that and what just kind of reflecting what you experienced, you're telling other people they get to be themselves.
Yeah.
And they get to be vulnerable, and it releases like societal shame and fear of being ourselves and being exposed.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff. And then the area where I think about it a lot is in relationship, whether it's friendship relationship or romantic relationship, and just how much it can make it so that can flourish, because each person can be themselves
Yeah.
and show up and then be on the other side of it too. So, like being able to hold space for their loved ones. And I mean, then that's something that we've experienced in all of the different circles that we're in, is that concept of being able to hold space and how powerful and beautiful that is. And so then being able to be on that reversed side,
Mm-hmm.
because you've experienced that too, where it's like seeing this other person in their vulnerability and just how, whoa,
Yeah. How beautiful it is.
yes.
Yeah, it is. And to be able yeah, just to be there for people in a real way.
Oh, yeah, deep. You're getting to the depths. You're not playing superficial games.
Yeah, it's such a gift. It's just so powerful. And that's, you know, I feel like that's just kind of like like a mission I want to share with the world is like, let's just start showing up messy. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of my theme this year too, and I've shared that with a few people. Like like one day, thank goodness I have an amazing hairdresser, and I was like, I'm running late for my appointment because I'm sitting in my car crying today. And she was like, okay, cool. And like I was able to go in there and she just like gave me a towel, not even a tissue, and just let me like be that way. And we laughed and cried a little bit the whole session. And then and the whole session, the whole haircut. And
They
then
are
I
therapists.
know.
What
And
are
then
they?
like the next, I come back, whatever, 6, 8 weeks later, and she's like, I'm unwell today. And I was like, oh, and so then I could just like show up for her or just, we can show up messy in the world to places. And when you're the first one doing it in the world, because there's not a lot of people doing it, you can tell it kind of like scares people that aren't there. Like it didn't scare her because she's like done some of the work, but you
Yeah.
can tell in other places people are just like, oh my God, you look like you've been crying, or like, you're not doing okay right now, and
You're not put
you're
together in
not,
our nice little box.
yeah, yeah. But the more we can just show up ourselves, yeah, it just gives everyone else permission. And then then we're not in fight or flight. Let's bring this full circle. Then we're not in fight or flight all the time, holding it all together. And then we can find pleasure easier.
Yeah. I
So we
mean,
get there sooner and it's not like everything. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, I'm like a big proponent for loving being our messy human selves
Yeah.
because we are. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know where this, I mean, we could probably psychoanalyze the entire history of all things, but where this concept of we are these neat, tidy creatures, like completely abandoning our wildness and, mm, I don't know, animalistic anythingness, where
Hmm.
it's like, nope, we're civilized, so
Well, yeah, I
we
think,
have to be these kept, I don't know.
yeah.
And it's very rigid.
Right. I think it comes back to all the things that are like buzzwords in the culture now that everyone's probably sick of hearing, but like the Puritan white body, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it all like, I feel like a lot of it ties into that of like just, like you said, the rigidity of our bodies and not being able to express. Like a lot of it, like culturally in our country and in the Midwest, I think a lot of it comes down to that
Mm-hmm.
of just having it. I mean, I think of my, even my dear like grandmother who I love. It's her birthday today
Yay.
as we're recording this, but even just how important it was for her to be seen a certain way,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
and especially in that generation. And um just little things she would, like it wasn't okay for things to look homemade even. As we're now, it's like that's cool again, but like
Right.
it's for your clothes to look homemade or even the food you made. There was just this perfectionism thread running through
Mm-hmm.
and how that continues to affect like all these other generations. And then I feel like you get to our generation where we're just like it stops here for a lot of
Yeah.
us, but a lot, for we're all like not all of us, but the majority of people in our generation are like, feel like we have anxiety and like all these different things going on. And it, for me, for a long time, it was like, why? Like, I have a great life. I have a job I love. Like, I have this great family. Like, why am I feeling this way? But then for me to acknowledging, like, well, it's in my DNA, right? Like this thread of perfectionism didn't just start with me,
Right.
right? It was like a thread that's been woven through, and just me being able to be like, it's not a flaw of mine to feel anxious. It's not a flaw that I, had struggled with perfectionism or trying to show up a certain way or feeling like I had to be controlling. Like, it was part of the shadow I've had to work through. And now I'm starting to get into the gift, and it's pretty it's pretty sweet, actually. So
I love that. And it makes me think about all of the emotional hush and shutdown that our generation and the generations before
mhm.
us, which kind of like started a lot of that thread, happened, and therefore how challenging vulnerability can be
Yeah.
because it was not made safe to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
You know, that was not what you do. You would be
Right.
shunned and shut out of like what is safe.
Hmm.
So it's not just us or this generation, and so I love how you brought all of that up. Um
Yeah, and why a lot of us, I think, are in therapy, because that is a safe place to be vulnerable. But how wonderful therapists are with all their education and schooling, but how beautiful for us to be able to, like, say, like the trickle down therapy is then be able to take that and express it in our friend groups and show up to them open and vulnerable and safe for them. So you don't, because right now I feel like we're in a world where you have to like pay for support, right? You pay for body work, you pay for therapy, you pay for all these things that used to be like a communal tribal thing happening. But now you pay for your doula, you pay for your postpartum support. Like everything
yeah,
that used to just be part of being in
part of
community.
culture. Yeah,
Yeah, like,
right.
which, and I feel like, yeah, that's good to pay people for the gifts. But it's just an interesting, I think about that a lot. Like, it's an
Yeah,
interesting
same.
thing. Like now, if you want that support, if you want that help, you got to pay. Where, especially, it's weird when it's like, when it is things like therapy or body work or things that, normally maybe like your friend or mom or husband or spouse could give you those things, but why there's that disconnect. And even as a therapist, when it's like, oh, it's hard to work on my family as a massage therapist or a myofascial therapist, like, that's interesting and sad to me. And it's
Yeah, and I
true,
don't I don't usually feel
but
that way personally. It's
mhm,
been a I'm always the weirdo in that way.
yeah.
But like I love working on my family and I love being that person. Um but I understand wanting like another person who's like objective and outside of it
Yeah.
as like a thing too. Um And I feel like we have like 40,000 other things because this is like making my mind spin. Because like we've definitely talked about this before too. Because then it's like it's gonna go into the whole money realm because of then how do all of the people where we are service people,
Hmm.
how are we supposed to make money if we're living in that type of a culture where money's how we pay our bills
Hmm.
and do all of this stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because
And
it
so
is the
like
exchange right now,
right.
which is fine.
And so
It's just interesting. It's just
it
interesting to
is.
me.
It is, but the community piece of it, because it makes me then think of like our groups and our circles and like holding the space for people and people being able to be vulnerable and us be able to like traverse all of this. And yet, depending on the day and what's happening in that circle, it could be a donation based thing, it could be a free thing, it could be a you're going to pay thing, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it just kind of depends on the circle of the day, the whatever it is, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. Okay. All right. I
We don't
feel
often get Crystal speechless. She's usually just like ready to respond. So this is this is a first.
Oh, well, part two, I'm trying to like see how we can like loop this back all together. um, Vulnerability. Here it is. Here I am. Okay. So as service practitioners, here's the loop. Here's the connection thread. We get to be holding that space for other people. We get to be experiencing people in their vulnerability and allowing themselves to be that way. So I don't know if we still even want to go into that right now, but we talked about a little bit like what is helpful for us as practitioners in being able to hold that space for another person.
Yeah, I mean, I always think, my main teacher, John Barnes, his main thing he always says, and it's so true, you can only take your patient or client as far as you've gone yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true because you
Oh, yeah.
don't have the bandwidth to hold it. Like when I'm like, hold the energy of the situation unless you've already been there and it's safe, right? Like, it's safe to go there, so you can hold the space for them to go there. Whatever comes up out of them isn't going to freak you out because you've been there and it's safe. It's kind of how I feel about it. Like, whatever comes up, it does, it's all good. Like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with what doesn't. And that's what I think is the thing too, is like, as a practitioner, it's easy. Like, when you're kind of like, when you're new to it, you're just like, whoa, everything's cool. And you're like actually kind of really good because you just don't even know what's going on. And then you get like in the middle where at least this was my journey, where you get a little still controlling because there's still this agenda. Like, you want them to get there.
Yeah, you want them better.
You want them better.
Results.
Yeah, and now I'm in a place where like I can be okay with them not getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know the world and the realm I'm working in is unlocking something in them, and they might continue to work with me. They might feel called that, I really need to have this surgery done. They might feel called to go down a different path. But all of it stemming from them getting more in touch with themselves. And it's like what you always say, we're sovereign. And so I don't care anymore. Like, I care for them, but I am just like, yes, like, let's work and unlock. And then some people, it continues and they continue to grow under my greenhouse of support, or some of them go on in other directions. And like, I'm just okay with it.
Yeah,
like
I love that.
Yeah, like they don't need me, but I'm there. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah. And I felt two very strong things while you were talking, which was, so for me, my lens for that is I don't want to teach or facilitate or things like that with things that I'm not embodied in myself.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. And if I am touching upon something that I'm not embodied in yet, I'll say that. I'll say, I've just tasted this, so that the people know, here's where I'm at with this. So you might even go farther than me with this particular tidbit, as we keep going. And then that non-judgment piece. So like knowing my own journey as a practitioner and like reaching that place of just non-judgment, where it's just everything is and everything is okay. So it creates that space for the vulnerability to even be present in the other person, and how much that creates that safe container, because it's all welcome.
Yeah.
Like, and it it takes a lot to shock me. I have had, people say things to me like, I know you don't think anything's weird, but, or I know you say you can't get shocked, but, and every single thing, it's, yep, cool, because, yeah, I mean, I would have to get really imaginative to think about something that could possibly push that edge, for me to even be too terribly surprised, shocked,
Right. And I think
you
that
know?
just comes with just being open too. Like it might be something I'd never heard of or just not my understanding, but
Right.
I'm just like you, I'm like, cool, okay.
Yeah, if it's
It's just
something I haven't heard of, then I mean, I can look into it. So it might be new,
right.
but it's not,
Yeah, it's just a really deep sense of just like non-judgment.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that. And then that sovereignty and just appreciating like the beauty and the radiance of people as they're in that place,
Yeah, that
you
is really
know?
magical to see. Uh, yeah, when people are in that place, it's so beautiful. It's so that's when I just get like I can't believe I get to like hold this space. It's so like sacred without making it sound like all cliche and like woo woo. It is just a really sacred place to be with people and to be able to hold that. I feel really really lucky that I get to do that. It's just um it's almost like I just picture like that deep sense of like bowing down in gratitude for
Mm-hmm.
just like all of everything that is. Like it's you're just seeing I don't even know. I mean, magic sounds like also like kind of a cliche word, but you're just seeing that in such a way. I don't know. It's just so beautiful.
It is. It's reverence. And
Yes.
it
Yeah.
just, it is.
I love it.
I do too. Mm. Mm. All right. Well, this is everybody's invitation to step into your own vulnerability, to maybe push your edge of where it feels comfortable, but don't go over it.
Yeah.
And
In a safe way.
and knowing that you're not alone and there are people out there that can really hold that container for you. And if your friend group isn't supportive enough, that there are like other groups in the world that can maintain that. And then also tuning into yourself and inviting that in, inviting some friends into your world who can be and match you in your ability to
Hmm.
be vulnerable and hold that space in a mutually consenting, awesome relationship type of situation, whatever it looks like. Um, and if you love this, if it touched you in any way, share it and spread the word, and we'll connect next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like more support, hop on the Pleasure Fairy app or find Katie at wellnesswithkatie.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Enlivening Musings if you want to share some takeaways or other requests for future shows. Enjoy!